Welcome to the breakdown, everybody. Thank you all so very much for staying with us during that break. We're rolling our head along here on Odyssey Radio, continuing our Freaky Friday. Now, this is a very interesting topic we're about to get into. I'm very excited about this as well. When I found this next guest, it was one of those things I didn't really think about. But then as soon as I saw it, I was like, well, that's intriguing, and I've got to find out more about that. Our next guest is Bill Broadbent, and he is going to be discussing with us how edible insects make sense. Bill is the president of Entosense and has been involved in the emerging edible insect industry since 2014. Bill, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, just right on the face of it, a lot of people hear this and they're like, what in the world are you talking about? So tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you into this idea of edible insects.
Well, I've always loved nature, being in nature and all that sort of thing, and so did my kids. So years ago, my son, this was around 2013, read a report by the UN's FAO about edible insects, and it talked about how we need to start incorporating them into our diet because of, basically the current animal agriculture that we have. And so I gave him what he jokes is a dad answer. And he kept researching it and coming back and saying, hey, did you know that they're raised humanely, that they're super nutritious, and, they're an ancient food. They're a food that we've, traditionally eaten and have, in a sense, in the past 400 or 500 years kind of given up. But that again is just here in the United States, Canada, basically Europe and Australia. Rest of the world still eats insects. So anyway, we put up a website more as an informational site and more to show them about the web and that sort of thing. And people started saying, hey, where can we get them? So we started bringing in just a few products, and they just sold like mad. So my sister, who was working for Condé Nast at the time, she actually gave up her job. She was FX director at the time, and we decided in 2015 to incorporate, and we put up a new website that was a retail site, and it was early enough, this was in 2015, early enough to get edibleinsects.com without thousands and thousands of dollars. So, since then, it's just grown and grown, and now we buy our insects from Thailand, Vietnam, Mexico, all over the place. We just got Mopani worms from South Africa. So it's been a lot of fun, and the whole family enjoys it. And it's grown to the point where we have 10,000 square feet and an old mill in Auburn, Maine, and we have 6 full-time employees and 3 or 4 part-time employees that come in when things get really busy.
So now, when you talk about your business and the products that you sell, are we talking about like you ship whole bugs, or do you ship like spices, or what is it about? What is it that you do? What kind of products do you offer?
We basically kind of have 2 markets. One market is the retail market to the consumer, and that's everything from whole insects. We have, chapulines, which are grasshoppers from Mexico, black ants, we have scorpions. In season, we'll have tarantulas. We don't have them right now, but, and crickets. And crickets are kind of the number one product. And then the other side of that is that we sell to a lot of restaurants. As far as chefs go, their favorite is black ants, and that's because they have a really powerful citrus taste. So in a recipe, you can just switch out lemon or lime for black ants. And, the joke is nobody eats dinner with, black ants as part of the meal and doesn't tell everybody they know. So there's kind of like built-in word of mouth advertising there. But most of the chefs there's actually 2 areas. Most of the chefs that we sell to are in higher end restaurants. They tend to be the black ants and scorpions, things like that, but also a lot of Mexican restaurants, because there's about 200 insects in Mexico that are considered food, and chapulines are one of the top ones. So we sell a lot to high-end Mexican restaurants.
This is already something that's been utilized or being introduced into the market. I mean, are these are these those gourmet restaurants that cost you like $150 a plate, or are these just regular mom and pop shops? I mean, what do you find are the people that are most interested in this type of gourmet delicacy?
Yeah, it tends to be the upper end restaurants all the way up to, like you mentioned, some of them are very, very high end. In fact, we have some private chefs that use them for high end catering. But it's it runs the gamut. You can get we have a food truck. I think it's in Houston that adds chapelinas to their tacos and burritos, and it's a big hit.
So when you say chapelinas, are we talking about you say those are grasshoppers, Mexican grasshoppers?
Yeah, like I mentioned, there's about 200 insects in Mexico that are considered food. Actually, there's kind of a joke about us going down there, and we'll be sitting in a bar, and right next to us will be, some spicy peanuts we really like, and we'll have our beer and be chowing down on these peanuts until somebody says, "Hey, did you know that those are grasshoppers?" Then all of a sudden we won't eat them anymore.
Oh, wow.
Because we have a real aversion to this, and it's a mental aversion. It's a mental challenge that people have a hard time getting over. But once you do, it's amazing. I mean, again, 2,000 different insects are considered food, and every one of them tastes different. And no doubt about it, the hardest bug to eat is your first one. But once you get past that, once you overcome that, irrational cultural fear, it's great. I mean, it's been fantastic. I've had a lot of fun, and can't imagine doing anything different right now.
So tell us about that first bug you tried. So the most difficult one to try out was. So your son comes to you. He had read this paper. Were you sold immediately on the idea of eating bugs, or was this like, yeah, I'm not sure, son, but I'm your dad, so I'm going to kind of support you. I mean, what was your thought process when he brought this to you?
Well, we live in Maine now, but my kids were born in New Mexico, and we used to go into Mexico a fair bit, and so we were familiar with the fact that other people, ate insects and we don't. But when he brought it forth, I wasn't exactly like jumping on board. To me, it was like it is for a lot of people. It's kind of like, okay, let them eat them, let them eat bugs.
Yeah.
But yeah, he just kept researching it, and he kept coming back, and he talked about how they're raised humanely. I mean, bugs like to live in tight spaces, so you can raise them in old warehouses instead of deforesting, the Amazon to make land for cattle. They have almost no greenhouse gases. They use very, very little water, and they're super nutritious. It's something that, just might be missing from our diets, because there's a lot of things that everything from it's a real animal protein, so it has all 9 essential amino acids, prebiotic fiber, which is nutrition for probiotics, and B12, omega-3, all sorts of great things. So it just kept making more and more sense. And we also did a few field tests. My daughter would take them into school at lunchtime and ask her friends to try them, and it was surprising, the reaction. We generally find that people from like 30 and over, we might get % of the people to try them during a presentation. But when we go to schools, it's about 50% immediately. And then by the end of the presentation, when they see their friends eating them, about 90% of the kids will end up eating eating crickets.
So what was the percentage?
Grasshoppers, whatever we brought.
What was the percentage of adults over 30?
Usually less than 50%.
Okay, less than 50%. So,
Yeah.
So several questions I'm kind of thinking of right now. First, so why do you think that there's such an aversion to eating? I'm not. It's not like I'm on board. I'm going to be honest with you. This is something that does have that kind of cultural shock to it. We're an affluent country. We have readily available meat sources and all kinds of different nutritious things. Why would we, be eating bugs? So, what is it that? Why is it that you think that there is a cultural aversion to eating bugs?
Well, there's a few reasons. one of the big ones happens to be that when Europeans first came to, the New World, they used that as a slur against the natives, saying that they ate six-legged animals. And that comes from the fact that most of the countries that we talk about, well, Europe especially, is in the northern hemisphere, and the bugs up there are small, and it takes a lot to collect a lot of bugs. But when you get into the southern hemisphere, there's a lot bigger insects, and it's a lot easier, and it's a lot more accepted in a sense. So ever since then, we've kind of looked down on it, considered it, survival food or the food of the poor, or that sort of thing. And unfortunately, it's our attitude that is kind of spreading around the world. I have a woman that we work with who has an insect farm in Thailand. She mentions that when her kids go out and want to celebrate, they have steak because that's what we eat here. We look at steak as, we revere steak. It's the top of the food chain. And she's trying to push us to do as much in social media as we can to show that Americans are also starting to adopt insects, so that her kids and the younger generation in Thailand who grew up eating insects, I mean, they, it's been part of their diet forever. And she's saying that, we way over here can influence them there.
So, and again, because I like meat. I'm a meat eater. Do you still have meat in your diet? Do you still eat steak and burgers and fish and all that?
So my son calls himself an ento-vegan, and he's basically a vegan, but he eats insects. And his main reason has to do with, the way animals are treated, in our animal agricultural systems. I grew up with meat and potatoes, so yeah. I do still eat meat. I've cut way back. I don't eat as much, but I still love a good steak. But I add the insects to my diet because of the health reasons. Because, for example, prebiotic fiber, the place you get prebiotic fiber is some mushrooms, and you get them in shellfish. But we don't eat the shells of shrimp or lobster. We eat the tails of shrimp sometimes, but very rarely, not enough to really give us much of an impact. So for me, the prebiotic fiber is a big one. Antioxidants is another one. But, it's relatively easy. I just sprinkle some black ants or, crickets, or use cricket powder and different things that we make. And yeah, I sometimes wonder if, insects aren't what's missing from our diet in a sense, because they have a completely different nutritional profile than anything else we eat. And they're real animal protein. So they're, it's pretty powerful.
Now you've said that a couple times about you think that may be missing from our diet. Do you see an increased health for people that are into vegans, or people that only consume that? Is there fewer immunosystem problems? Are they overall more healthy, more agile, or is that just a possibility that you haven't they haven't fully investigated?
No, there actually has been some studies, and they're just starting. There's a whole bunch of studies, Tufts University and a few others, that are ongoing. They have proven that it improves gut health. That's what got me going on the prebiotics is, everybody's into probiotics, and, you eat more yogurt that has live probiotic bacteria and all that sort of stuff for your gut health. But prebiotics is nutrition for probiotics. So it's kind of like having 10 chickens and saying, let's add 10 more chickens, but you don't increase the feed. Oh, yeah. So, it's a way to build that. And that has been proven in a shorter term study. But, most of these studies have to have years to get going. And it's really only been the past 4 or 5 years that this has really picked up. And when I say really picked up, I mean, there's a 20,000 square foot cricket farm in Texas. And that company, Aspire, is building another one outside of Toronto, and also outside of Toronto is the largest one I know of, and it's 60,000 square feet just dedicated to growing crickets.
60,000 square feet dedicated to growing crickets.
Yeah. And we're about to see all sorts of stuff come out health-wise. I mean, like I said, it takes years for these studies, and they have to be peer-reviewed and all that sort of stuff. But I've talked to a lot of these scientists. I mean, one of them I know did an initial research by feeding the crickets carrots, and they ended up very high in vitamin A, and it's bioavailable vitamin A. And I say that because that's one of the other things is that the nutrition is very bioavailable. A lot of times you can take, different pills and things like that, vitamin pills and that sort of thing, and you're not really getting it. It can say there's X amount of calcium, but you're not ingesting or you're not processing as much as they say is on there. But with insects, we process a lot of it. I mean, I don't have an exact amount, but it's a much higher amount because it's all natural. It's something, again, it's ancient. It's something our bodies have been used to processing forever.
Yeah, I've often thought about that because there have been some other folks who have talked about a plant-based diet, so eating not a total vegan, but eating a higher plant-based diet. And they've talked about the foods like the meats, the porks, the things like that. The higher, considered higher in food are considered like rich foods that the rich people would eat. Like you're saying, this kind of European influence on America because that's what was available more prevalently over there. But I've heard that referred to as rich foods, and I've often thought, does the meat that we eat now, was that always a stable part of our diet? Did people always have cattle or lamb or any type of meat like that they could just go out and slaughter and have? I mean, I would think, and looking back at the history, it seems that livestock was more of a not a difficult thing to raise, but more of something that people who had money or influence or land were able to raise, and that the regular folk, I guess you could call them, were those who were not eating that food. So there had to be something that sustained them for a period of time. So
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say you're correct. Eating meat is a luxury, and we've been able to bring it to a point where you can have meat every day if you want, but it's not something that our bodies are used to, or I guess they are now, but haven't been. And I had another point I was going to make, and I kind of drifted off, but
I'm sure it'll come back to you.
Yeah, it'll come back.
Yeah, we're talking to Bill Broadbent from Entosense, and he's been involved in the emerging edible insect industry since 2014. I think that would be one of those things because capitalism. I'm a capitalist. I have no problem with people making money. I have no problem with people finding a product that folks want and then maximizing on that. Obviously that's what's happening here in the edible insect industry. I have no issue with that. My concern, though, and that you've mentioned this a couple of times, and then some research that I've done and some documentaries that I've watched over the years, and you've mentioned it, that it was a moral issue for your son as well about the treatment of livestock and the treatment of animals that are raised for slaughter. So tell us a little bit about that and your research and your studies that you've done. What type of animal mistreatment are you talking about that may have led you or your family or your son to believe that that was an inhumane way of growing food and moving in this direction?
Well, one of the images that we remember as a family is when we lived in New Mexico and we used to go down into Mexico. We drive into southern New Mexico, and we go through the stockyards, and it was just miles and miles and miles of cows that were packed shoulder to shoulder, just waiting to be slaughtered. And obviously that's not great for the animal, and so that kind of triggered it. And then as we started looking into it as well, to be able to raise animals like that, they have artificial hormones and they have all sorts of other things that they do to increase the size of the animal and, the speed in which they grow and that sort of thing. So that's what really triggered it. And then, of course, if you go online and you look at some of the videos, there's a video of a pig farm and a couple of videos of chicken farms that are fairly famous because of how terrible it looks. I mean, you just have to see it and it immediately hits you. You're asking if I still eat meat. One of the other things that I do is I do go to the farmers markets now and buy beef and chicken and things like that from smaller farms, people that have a small herd of cattle out back and that they're happy,
Yeah, absolutely.
And backyard chickens, eggs from neighbors. I also, obviously I think that's positive too, because I'm keeping the money within our community. And, you don't find people who work harder than farmers. If anybody deserves to live all right, it's our farmers.
Oh, definitely agree with that. Definitely agree with that. There, and it's good that you're kind of putting that into use as well, because so many people they look at this, and of course we're going to talk about the environment in a little bit as well. I want to hit on that, but I don't think that people, you go to the store, you buy whatever food products, whatever meat products you want to buy, and so many people don't realize that there are the artificial hormones, the pharmaceuticals that are pumped into them. We have 4 chickens. God rest the souls of the 2 other that were killed by a raccoon. But we have 4 chickens, and we don't raise them for meat. We raise them strictly for the eggs. And just looking at them, we give them, protein in the winter so that they can, when they molt, they can actually get their feathers back faster and such. So we take care of them. We kind of look at them like pets. But one thing I've noticed is that they're leghorns, and they don't seem to be as big as the other chickens that you see on TV or you see in these different farms and such. And it's because mainly we feed them at night when they go back into the coop. We make sure they have some feed there. But the entire day they're out roaming, and ironically enough, they're eating insects all day long. So they're free range chickens. But when you look at a lot of the chickens and the animals that are raised for slaughter specifically, it appears that they are that they're not as healthy as free range animals should be. Chickens that are pumped full of pharmaceuticals so they don't get all kinds of diseases, and then they're just fed, like almost like an assembly line, and they're so large they can't get up on their legs. That doesn't seem like it is a sustainable style, not only for the environment, but it doesn't seem like it's a stable process of growing food for us in the long run. Because if we're eating that, if we're ingesting that stuff, it's only going to make us even more sick.
Yeah, and as you were saying this, I thought of 2 points. One is basically insects don't have pathogens that can be transferred to humans, like swine flu or bird flu, that sort of thing. And in the way that they're being raised, aren't we kind of promoting the disease? Aren't we promoting the idea that they're going to get sick because of, just like you said, they can't even stand up, some of them, especially turkeys and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, the fewer chemicals in anything is better, it seems, as far as food goes. And then another angle I'm going to hit real quick is you have backyard chickens. Well, on the other side, there's food and there's feed. Insects with feed is growing as fast or faster. And there's what's called the black soldier fly larva. It eats twice as weight every single day. Food waste, and it can be restaurant waste, it can be grocery store waste, brewers waste, stuff that goes into our landfills and creates greenhouse gases, instead becomes food for the black soldier fly larva. And then that larva is the natural food for chickens and even pigs and trout and salmon. And there's even a neat little thing going on now that I like to promote for people with backyard chickens. You can take a bin and toss your leftovers in there, and if you don't have enough leftovers, just some weeds and stuff, and the black soldier fly larvae will start growing. And when they get to a point where they pupate, they want to get away from the colony. So you just add a ramp that goes up, and they'll crawl up that ramp, fall into a tin, and the chickens can come along and have free feed.
Wow, that's awesome. So you're saying, because I do I have a compost bin. Are these black soldier fly larvae prevalent in the Midwest in the United States?
Yeah, they're native to almost the entire United States, except the very, very northern areas. We're right on the edge of their most northern territory. But yeah, once you do need to, you can search it online. If you can email me, I'll send you some links. But you start out with your own little black soldier fly larva. But as they grow and enough of them escape and turn into black soldier flies, they'll come out and continue to lay eggs. And you can all through the summer, you'll continue to have those larvae.
That's amazing. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. We'll definitely have that link up there for more information on that, because I know chickens they're easy to raise or easy to take care of, and a lot of people are doing it. It's one of those more popular things that people are doing to try to take control of the type of food that they eat and such. But definitely would like to get some information on that. My chickens are going to love you, Bill. they're going to be extremely happy. So
yeah.
And it's so amazing as well. I know that you said you had you've always been, had a fascination with nature and those in that area. But it's amazing to me how people look at flies and they think, oh, flies are just so annoying. They're disgusting. They bug me all through the day, etc. But it's amazing how we have an ecosystem that is so reliant and so dependent upon each other. You mentioned there land waste and landfills and a lot of the garbage that we produce as Americans here in the States. The being able to take care of that in a biodegradable way with these insects and then turn around and have those insects become food for our animals or even food for us seems like like an interdependent ecosystem that is necessary, obviously, for the sustainment of life long term.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful cycle. I mean, they're eating our food waste and they turn into food, and then their waste is actually a high nitrogen fertilizer. So everything gets turned back into nature.
That's amazing stuff. Now, let me ask you this, because you've mentioned there about the humane raising of these animals or of these insects. When I told my daughter about this, she's very sensitive. She wants to be a vegan. If it wasn't for eggs, she loves eggs, but she wants to be a vegan, and I'm honestly I'm fine with that. There's a lot of research that say it's a very healthy lifestyle. But one of the things that she said was she still doesn't want to. She still wouldn't want to eat bugs because something has to die. You have to kill it. And so tell us about that. You've mentioned a couple times about humane ways of raising insects as food. What does that look like?
Yeah, basically everything gets killed.
Yeah.
So the difference with insects, though, is first of all, they like to live in tight spaces. Crickets love to live in very, very tight colonies. During one of the conventions I was at, somebody from the Cattlemen's Association showed up, and actually she was very pro. She was looking into the feed side of it. So she wasn't like I'm saying it like, ooh, evil person from the Cattlemen's Association. But the one question she asked is, she said, okay, everybody's talking about, how they're raised humanely. How do you know? How do you know that your crickets are happy? And one of the farmers said, well, first of all, crickets chirp to attract the opposite sex. Only male crickets chirp, and it's to attract the females. So if they're not happy, they won't chirp and they won't breed. So you have to keep them happy.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so you do everything you can to keep them happy. In fact, one of them was talking about how a lot of people, when we started, we initially raised some, but our sales outpaced it, and so we started buying from other people. But we raised them in bins, and you can raise them in bins in your garage or in your house or whatever. But on the bigger farms now, they're doing open range in a sense. They're still inside a big room, but they have these what they call cricket condos, is areas where they have the structure for all sorts of crickets in this condo and then another one nearby. So if crickets don't get along with their current colony, they just leave and go to another one. Oh. So, it's super humane. Oh, and then as far as the life goes, first of all, they want them they grow very quickly. It's a 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the type of insect, generally, egg to harvest cycle. So you're harvesting after only a couple months, but you want them to grow as big as possible. And that's pretty much towards the end of their life. To harvest them, they just put them in a refrigerator or freezer and freeze them. And that's just like winter coming on. Crickets don't survive the winter, their eggs do. So it's just like in nature. They're living a very similar life as in nature, except that they always have food.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you can argue that it might be a little bit better than in nature, it's or not, not nature, but right. Outside in the wild. So yeah, I mean, as far as your daughter's concerned, they are as happy in a sense as can be, and she should consider being an ento-vegan. we have a lot of, not as many vegans because they don't want to eat sentient beings and they consider
right.
insects sentient beings, but we have a lot of vegetarians that buy from us because of the B12, the omega-3, and the fact that it's a real animal protein, so they're getting all the essential amino acids that they can't get very easily from plants.
That is amazing. And of course, I believe that would be the moral issue that she would have. She's young right now, and as mentioned, she still does eat meat, but I think she doesn't really think about where it comes from. I don't think she allows herself. I'm a hunter, so she doesn't like to hear me talk about hunting stories. I have to be very discreet about where I process deer, and make sure that she doesn't see anything or have anything to do with it at all. She has wanted to go hunting with me, but only to take pictures. And if my teenager wants to hang out with me, then I'll go I'll take pictures of wildlife
right.
for her to do that. So, the fascinating conversation. Again, we're talking to Bill Broadbent, who started Entosense. Bill, we're going to be taking a break in here in just a minute. Give us the website where people can go to get some information about your products and more about this.
Yeah, it's easy to remember. It's edibleinsects.com. And you'll immediately see all our products. But on the right-hand side, there's a column with articles about, everything from nutrition to, basically everything we're talking about.
Fantastic. So folks, we're going to take a quick break here. When we get back, I'm fascinated by this, and I'm willing to try. I remember a time, Bill, and as we go to break, I'll tell you the story. And if you want to comment when we come back, you can. But I remember a time when one of the chefs that we had at a job I was working, we were planning a big fundraising event, and he was in charge of getting all the food, of course, as the chef. And one day we were having a committee meeting, and we were trying to figure out what the menu was going to be. We were trying different kind of foods and desserts and sodas, etc. And everybody started eating from this bowl of chips that he had in the middle of the table, and we were all just noshing on these things. They were delicious, and everybody was like, "Oh, these are so good, they're so fantastic." Well, then he produces the empty bag from these tortilla chips that had been on the table, and they were cricket chips. They had crickets in the chips. So now everybody immediately, even though like you said, it was like eating the nuts down there in Mexico. They immediately went into a revolt and started to get angry at him, and then decided that it was gross and they were upset. So, but anyway, we can talk about that when we get back from the break. We're talking to Bill Broadbent, edibleinsects.com. And this is a fascinating conversation, folks. So keep it locked in right here on Odyssey Radio.
Asking the questions that get you kicked out of Bible studies and sent to therapy.
You're listening to The Breakdown.
At Romika Designs, we're more than just a laser engraving and specialty design company. Much more. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs, and if you can dream it, we can probably make it. We can custom laser cut and engrave on nearly all material. Great for one-of-a-kind gifts, home decor, business and specialty items, or personalized and logo designs created just for you or your company. Allow us to become your go-to gift and specialty project partner. Romika Designs can help make your ideas a reality. We're ready to help you design and create that special gift for any occasion, or engrave your personal or business logo on just about any product. View our designs at romikadesigns.com or simply email us with your ideas. We specialize in custom design and would be honored to have the opportunity to discuss it with you. Call us at 817-400-4040, email info@romikadesigns.com, or visit us on the web at romikadesigns.com.
Welcome back to The Breakdown, everybody. Thank you so very much for staying with us. We're talking to Bill Broadbent, edibleinsects.com. Bill, have you ever done that to anybody? Have you ever snuck bugs into a meal and then afterwards been like, surprise, you just ate a tarantula?
To an extent, because you brought something up I should have mentioned in the very beginning. It's that allergies.
Oh, yes.
If you're allergic to shellfish, you may be allergic to insects. And I say may because it seems to go back and forth. But some people are allergic to insects just like they are with shellfish because of the chitin. And that's the exoskeleton of the insect or the exoskeleton of a crab or, lobster, shrimp, that sort of thing. That's what people are. But yeah, like you mentioned with the chips and things like that, as long as we know that, it's safe, we've tried it a few times. I should also mention that everybody's already eaten tons and tons of insects. I don't know if maybe a ton, but a lot of insects.
Yeah.
The most common foods that have insect parts in them are baking flour, bread, and chocolate, and coffee. You just can't get insects out of everything that you're doing. So to get back to also what you're talking about, those chips you were talking about are chirps. And on Shark Tank, Mark Cuban has invested in 2 different edible insect companies. One company is called Chipotle, and they make energy bars with cricket powder. So you're getting the real animal protein. And then there's Chirps chips, and they're chips that taste great, and they just have cricket powder, baked into them.
Have you? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to. Have you gone on Shark Tank or attempted to go on Shark Tank at all?
We were invited, except that it was too early in our progress. We didn't have enough sales behind us. We would be a lot more impressive now, but at the same time, hate to say it, but I think we're looking for a better deal than they usually get in Shark Tank.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, you're one of the. How many companies do you think are out there that actually do this? I mean,
in the United States, it's 3 or 4 dozen.
Okay, so it's not a very crowded market right now. Then you're in on the ground floor of this.
And that's what makes it a lot of fun, is that we know everybody. There's conferences once a year, twice a year, depending. Sometimes it's more science oriented, sometimes it's more industry oriented. But I've met almost everybody in the industry, and there's no serious competition because it's such a big market and such a small supply. And that's one reason why it's a little bit expensive right now. It's a high demand, low supply. But with these new farms coming in and, these huge new farms showing up, the price will come down.
So what is the most interesting recipe, the most creative edible insect dish that you've had?
I get asked that kind of question a lot, and I'm not a chef, so I'm not great at, the other ingredients, but I've had some really good. One of my favorites is a ginger silkworm pupae soup. And it just tastes great. Again, it's a mental challenge you have to get over. But once you do, there's all sorts of great things. I've had some really good meals made with with the chapelinas, and we've Linger is a restaurant in Denver that uses our black ants, and they've done some really great things.
Oh, okay. Well, hello there, puppy. The pup wants to be a part of the interview as well. I'm sure the dog's eating their share of insects. So
but dog food is another area that is dog and cat food is an area that right now is developing with using insects instead of beef and chicken.
So you mentioned the psychological aspect of this. What was the first bug you consciously ate? Not the bug you ate while you were riding your bike and you swallowed a fly, but what was the first bug that you were like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm taking the plunge. I'm going to nosh on this thing. What was it, and how did you get through it?
It was a cricket, and I think I mentioned earlier, but the hardest bug to eat is your first one, and it was hard. I remember looking at it and deciding to try it, and then like shudder a little bit and think about it, and when you finally do, it's surprising. I mean, crickets don't have a strong taste. It's kind of a mild taste, and very few people dislike it. So once you do, it opens up a whole new thing. Eating a cricket is kind of like somebody handing you a lettuce leaf, saying, taste this and let me know what you think about vegetables. Again, 2,000 different insects, and everyone tastes different. Humiles, which are kind of a type of stink bug down in Mexico, taste like pistachio. The legs of tarantulas do taste a bit like crab. I don't like the abdomen or the thorax. It's a really crazy taste to me. The worst insects I've ever eaten is a centipede, and I compare it to when you try and siphon gas and you get gas in your mouth and it just won't go. And I think the craziest insect I've ever eaten is the murder hornet.
No, a murder hornet?
Yeah, in Japan, hornet larvae are considered a delicacy. And when, all last year, or was it the year before, when all the stuff came out about murder hornets,
Right.
a chef from Japan sent us some. And so I had two kinds. One was the whole murder hornet, and it just tasted like popcorn without butter. There wasn't much taste to it. But then there was a larva that was soaked in sukadami sauce. And I don't know what I was tasting, the sukadami sauce, which I've never had before, or the larva together, but that was really good.
Wow. Well, it's amazing, of course, again, it's the psychological aspect of it, to get past that. But I'm sure, with 2,000 insects, you're looking at spicy, sweet, bland, crunchy, soft, gooey, creamy, yet satisfying, all of that. So, one of the things also that I like about this, and through my research found very intriguing, there is a large concern of those who are in the edible bug industry are concerned about food security. So first, speak to us a little bit about food security and why that is such a large component in the edible bug industry, or if it is.
Well, it is, because food insecurity is a major cause of, strife and war and all that sort of stuff. People that live in rural areas, when there's some type of plague or famine or something, a drought, they tend to move into the cities. And when they move into the cities, because they can't work on the fields anymore, they take jobs that people in the cities used to have, and, all sorts of tensions start. So that's one angle of it. The other angle is, we're here in Maine, and in northern Maine, there's still kids that are malnutrition. And, in this day and age, it's just hard to believe, but it's true. And this is one way that they can get around that. You can grow crickets in your, garage. You can grow them in your basement or some spare room. And you can grow them on leftovers from your dinner. And if you, like I said earlier, if you run out of that, you can just go grab a bunch of weeds.
Yeah.
So this is it's both a very low cost way for people to have real protein, and it goes all the way up to, these big businesses that, have 20,000 square foot warehouses, and actually they have robotic feeders. The crickets are fed robotically, but so all over the world, insects are a backup for people that can't get food elsewhere.
That's fascinating. And then, of course, you mentioned the food insecurity here in the United States as well. The aspect that I thought was fascinating about this is we have so much turmoil. And honestly, I don't care what your politics are. I'm not asking about that. But there is a great deal of people. There are a great deal of people who are worried about Planet X doing a flyby and causing massive weather perturbations. There are people who are worried about government encroachment, people who are worried about famines, who are worried about the end times, doomsday scenario type things. And one of the big things everybody always talks about, a huge conversation piece, is making sure you have storable foods. I'm all about that. Be prepared for any situation. Don't be prepared just for doomsday. Be prepared for a tornado, a hurricane, a grid down situation where you have to have a gravity fed water supply, all of those things. So when I look at this, it may not be that I'm going to, go get me, a jar full of crickets or some of those chirps and nosh on those as a snack yet. I'm not saying I won't, but I'm not going to go out tonight and buy some crickets and nosh on those. But when you look at a sustainable or from a prepper side of this, where people are wanting to be prepared, it seems like this would be a sufficient or more than sufficient protein supply for someone who wanted to get off the grid, someone who wanted to have a small footprint, and then be able to still have enough protein to take care of them and their families. Is that something that's ever come up in the conventions you've gone to or the trade shows you've attended?
Nobody's done it yet, but we have had conversations, and I've been expecting them to, because, for example, we have crickets that are 5 years old and they still taste all right. They've lost a bit of their taste, and you can tell they're not as fresh in a sense, but they're still good, and still fine. So, if you had a stock of crickets and say chapelinas and a few other things, there's your emergency food source, and 5 years later, it's still good.
And of course, if you want to sustain those, it seems to be that you can grow these like you said. You can have your scraps, your table scraps, be something that the black soldier fly larva can eat on, and then provide a food source there for your animals. But is this something that a person who is bent towards preparing and getting off the grid, is this something that they should seriously consider doing because it seems to be a little more easy than raising cattle?
Oh yeah, it takes a lot less room.
Yeah.
Especially people off grid. When I used to live in New Mexico, a bunch of our friends were off grid. Our close neighbors, and they had their chickens in their gardens and everything. And this was prior, of course, to us doing this. But I look back on it and I think, they should have had their little insect farm along with all that. Especially if you have a garden, because you're throwing away a lot of stuff. The tops of carrots are cricket food.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're looking for that way, like we were talking about earlier, is the dependent ecosystem, where our table scraps become the food for our future food source. If somebody were to want to go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and then the frass from the insects, or frass is what's called the poop from the insects, is a fertilizer. So, it's like I said before, it's a beautiful cycle.
It is. This stuff fascinates me. I might be a newbie to it, but everything about this is very fascinating to me. Again, we're speaking to Bill Broadbent, the president of Entosense. And what if somebody were to move to want to do that, Bill, to get into a survival mindset, what would be the easiest or I'll go with the easiest. What would be the easiest insect for them to start to grow that would be a sufficient food source for them and something where they can learn the process of that?
The two that are easy. Crickets aren't super easy. They're one of the easier ones, but black soldier fly larvae are really easy. And then mealworms. Those are the worms that you might find in your cereal or oatmeal or something. Those are easy to grow as well. And if you want to learn how, just search them on YouTube. There's a ton of great videos now. When we started, there was almost nothing out there. And, people have just posted more and more. And at this point, there's some really good videos on how to grow insects.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about the environmental impact that this has. Of course, we know that is the environmental impact, the environmental focus, just on the cattle and on the pork and on the different meat that's being raised, or is there a different environmental and ecological impact that one can find or see if they move to an edible bug diet or growing these for themselves?
Well, beyond the inhumane treatment of animals or whatever, there is the both pollution, the methane gas, and all that happens because we're throwing away so much waste. I mean, so much organic food is going into our landfills or being dumped in the ocean, whatever it happens to be, and it could be consumed by insects, and the insects could become food or feed. Mealworms, and they'll even go through plastics. And they're still safe to feed to an animal after they've done that. So there's so many things that we could be doing, and I think that we've actually talked about approaching a couple of our towns and saying, hey, why don't we work with your landfill? So instead of taking, when these restaurants and these grocery stores are sending you these big truckloads of organic waste, let's put it into black soldier fly farm. You end up with a valuable source of animal feed that you can sell and make money on instead of just dumping it in the land.
So
I think towns ought to promote this. I think all these brewers ought to. Brewers' waste is a great thing for black soldier flies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you're saying that people are approaching their local landfills and talking to them about using or about working with them. If insects are drawn to that, why aren't the landfills already being consumed, or why aren't we seeing a depletion of those landfills already? Because it seems like the insects would be going there regardless if it were on a specific farm or a particular location.
Well, they do, except that, we bury them, and so there's limited access.
Okay.
If we approached it right, then, and you also, for example, black soldier flies, like I said before, they may not find it right away. So you can seed it in a sense by bringing in some larvae. But once the adults know that it's there, they're going to come back to lay their eggs.
Okay, so because of the way that landfills are constantly shifting and making more space, burying their previous refuse and adding more to it, it's more difficult for the life cycle of these animals, these insects to make it through, because we're actually killing the larvae or killing the insects.
Yeah, plus we're dumping in all this lawn waste and pesticides and all sorts of other stuff that's poisonous. And so, you're not going to get that from a restaurant or from a grocery store. But when you mix it in with what's coming in from the farm fields, and also just from people's lawn clippings and that sort of thing.
So, and it seems like it does make sense, because if you're spreading a lot of that out to a lot of different farms, or you're moving that to different areas and different places, it would seem like it would be an easier access for those insects to have their way with it.
Yeah, there's two things I should say here. Also, I should mention wild harvesting. If you wild harvest, you have to be careful that you are far enough away from some places where people spray pesticides.
Oh yeah.
And as long as you are, then there's no reason you can't harvest them in the wild. But that's something you do have to be concerned with.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, with anything like that, growing food or insects or even hunting, I was integral a few years ago. There was a place of business I worked at that was spraying some very nasty weed killers and chemicals around my place of residence, and then also on the land where we were charged to take care of. And as a Christian, I look at that as an offense. I believe that we are supposed to be good stewards of the earth that God created, and that we're supposed to take care of it. So in a sense, I'm unified with a lot of folks who have this idea of taking care of our planet, leaving it a better place than where we found it. But yeah, making sure that those pesticides aren't in those areas and aren't around you and around your food supply is a common sense thing that each person should do, regardless of whether or not you're eating bugs or whether or not you're eating animals. So definitely agree with that, Bill.
Right, and here's something that's really scary. First of all, we use Roundup all the time, and we're the only country, pretty much the only country. It's outlawed in Europe. It's outlawed in a lot of places because it's carcinogens and, causes cancer, that sort of thing. But in Germany, they did a study from 1970 to 2020, and they were studying the amount of flying insects. And according to their study, and of course this is in Germany, there's 70% less flying insects than there were in 1970. And I started driving in 1976. And if you remember way back, you always had to clean your windshield when you went on a long drive. And I haven't had to clean my windshield, and I can't tell you how long.
Oh, wow.
So they call it the insect apocalypse. And if we lose a certain portion of insects, then we're in serious trouble, because obviously, so many animals depend on eating insects or eating animals that eat insects, and, that sort of thing.
Well, it's the destruction of our environment for the sake of making money, which I'm sure is a completely different show that you and I can have and talk about, brother. So, all right, we've only got about a minute left here. Give us the website again, and where we can find more information about this topic of edible bugs.
Sure. Again, it's edibleinsects.com, and you can find anything there from Manchurian scorpions to crickets and mealworms. We have mini kickers as our number one product. There's 10 different flavors of crickets in a tube, about 100 crickets per tube. It ranges from mango habanero to cotton candy.
Cotton candy crickets?
So, cotton candy crickets. It's the kids' favorites. Not one of my favorites because it's an earthy cotton candy taste, but I love mango habanero. I like, Italian lasagna, lemon meringue, orange creamsicle. There's some great flavors.
Fantastic, brother. All right, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this. Again, this is a very fantastic and fascinating topic. All right, folks, you heard it. Go to edibleinsects.com. Also, head on over to breakdradio.com for this show and more, and all the show notes to link up to there. And until next time, everybody, thank you, and make Christ supremely valuable.